in order to share some of these stories. Is there anybody here or at any table that thinks that there's a story that that the whole group might want to hear? Come on right up here, Jim. You got to come up, yeah.
My name is Jim Berry. I'm a senior citizen. I'll be 81 next month. But I want to tell you a story about a senior citizen. My good friend George Frank right here. He's 90 years old. We have become great friends. He lost his wife. He lost his 2 daughters. He lives alone. I guess it's about a year now. We go to VA every week, and the people are helping him. But the part that I want to say is I knew nothing about the VA. So I go down to West Fall, and I see all these men and women, and George is a World War II veteran. He had the flight trip to Washington. But I see so many people, and all they want to do is say hi. We had an experience last Monday where 4 doctors, and I mean kind, compassionate, understanding doctors, worked with George. And George is a wonderful person. Those of you who know his background, he did years of work at St. John's Evangelist in Greece. He helped people, but now he's quiet, alone. But I never knew that because I've been involved in so many other things. But I'm very happy to listen to and be patient with senior citizens. You don't have to listen to me, but that's okay. Thank you, that's all.
Anybody else burning to tell a story? Now that we got the microphone working.
I didn't tell you to the table though, is that okay?
Sure.
Is this the one? Hello. I'm Colleen Fogarty. I'm a family physician and I practice just down the street at Brown Square Health Center. And I really appreciated you talking about the gospel and your person you knew who went to church and was known in the neighborhood. And in my practice, I take care of lots of different people from around this neighborhood and around the Rochester area. And a number of women that I come into contact with are sex workers or prostitutes. And I saw a patient one day who was not a patient of mine, patient of a colleague for a long time, and she'd come in with a terrible laceration on her hand and said that she, I don't like to pry too much, but I said, well, you know, what happened what happened to you? And she said that she had come into contact with a man who she thought was requesting her services, and instead he threw her in the back of a vehicle and attacked her and gave her this horrific laceration, and only by the grace of God did she get away with her life. And I thought, wow, that's not something that I'm afraid of for myself, and that she endured this. And she said, oh yeah, you know, I've been doing this for years, and I got my drug habit, and Dr. So-and-so knows me. And I said, oh, okay, I'm glad. And this other physician colleague of mine really has taken care of her for years and really accepts who she is, accepts her life, accepts her reality, and is non-judgmental. And so I was able to get her stitches out and give her some recommendations for her wound, and that was about it. But it really stuck with me that there's this long-standing doctor-patient relationship that was not my doctor-patient relationship that was able to be so healing for her in the face of all this danger.
Thank you, Colleen, very much. One more, John?
Yeah, I'll stand up here. I think Rosa and I are from Holy Apostles Parish. I have property live on Lyle Avenue. So all the problems that, well, by the way, the service was beautiful today, and I was happy to be back here since the renovation. But everything was beautiful today. I'll be back next week to see how it work. But anyway, we have many unique problems there on Lyle Avenue, and you mentioned all the different problems, but I think there's a great silent majority here in our country. And what I think this should be done in Rochester, more people should speak up about the poverty. We're the third highest in the nation, I guess, for poverty and child poverty. But more people should speak up. They should go to city, be elected officials in City Hall. I go there to speak to council when I can, and you need to get involved and they have to come up with solutions. Everybody has to come up with solutions. But I think the city officials, I don't know, they have a deaf ear to, they're concentrating on downtown and College Town and Sherlock, and then they're forgetting about all the problems in the neighborhoods. So more people have to speak up. So Sister Peggy, you should go down there.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Sit down.
So we're doing more of that too, so in the near future. And then my home there, my grandparents bought the home in the 1920s, Holy Apostles, from almost the whole length of the history of Holy Apostles. My aunts went to Holy Apostles grade school in the 1920s. So I've been there, my family's been there a long, long time. My sister Patty Lippa, she was a wonderful layperson for the church. Passed away now. So anyway, we have a big history there. I have a big history there, and I don't know, no one wants to listen. So I'm
You've done a lot, John.
I'm going back to city council now. And my nieces and nephews, they live in Florida. They've recently written the mayor, and they're fourth generation. And so we're trying to get something going there. So.
Thank you.
All right.
I think we have to go on. So now that we've kind of identified who these people on the periphery are, how do we engage them? What can we do? Now, it's in this cathedral community, I know you're already reaching out to people who are on the edges. Mary's Place is just a wonderful place, welcoming immigrants and refugees from so many countries, and work with them to transition to our country. And you're starting a food pantry right here, which is a real need in this zip code. They do these things by zip codes, and 15 and 13 don't have as many services for people. So I'm really happy that you're doing this food pantry. Any other initiatives that are right here at Sacred Heart or in the cathedral community? Those are two big ones, and they take a lot of people, a lot of manpower.
There's
Mary Ann?
the All Stars program. Which
Oh,
is
yes,
for
the tutoring.
for
That's right.
young children. And
That's
definitely
right.
reaching out.
So Francis asked us to go beyond, excuse me, our comfort zones to reach those who need the good news. And this little quotation that's on your sheet there, the church must step to the outskirts of existence, wherever that may be. What happens if we step outside ourselves? Same as can happen to anyone who comes out of the house and into the street, an accident. But I tell you, I prefer a church that has had a few accidents to a church that has fallen sick from being closed. Go out, take the risk. Doesn't it sound like them? When the Sisters of St. Joseph were founded in the 17th century, so this is a long time process here, our founder had a wonderful formula for finding out what needs were. He said, look at the city, quarter it, go into each quarter, find out what the ills were, what the societal ills were in each quarter, then come back together and with others try to figure out how to do it, how to go in and take care of those needs. So if you quarter it, it isn't such a big task, you know. Look, even in our city, if you quarter it, the different quarters of the cities have different problems, really. Some of them are the same, but there are different ones depending on the neighborhoods. So it's really a good way to do it. And it sounds like Francis, go out, engage others. You can't do it alone. Don't try to do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. We're all together in this. Do what you can. So how do we do it? How do we engage the people on the periphery? This is Francis's formula. He has 4 things. The first is serving. That's the easiest one, and that's the one that's the most people can do, or they think they can't do the others so much. But serving, I have it, you need it, here it is. You know, it's pretty simple. Somebody comes to the door, you give them what they need, goodbye, good luck, have a good day, and you feel good about yourself. I've experienced that a lot. It gets more difficult when you have to figure out why do these people have to come and ask me in the first place? What's the reason for their being in this situation? That's the hard part. It takes commitment, patience, and a lot of humility. But we begin the process with serving. Serving is the beginning. Simply getting to know people, getting to know what their needs are, people who need our help, our friendship, our care. Respectfully sharing what we have with others, respectfully sharing what we have with others. And I always think of St. Theodore's, and people who are, those of you who are starting the new food pantry, might be good for you to talk to some of them. They have a wonderful group at St. Theodore's who have a food pantry. The reason people go there, want to go there, is that they're all on the same page. They're all respectful. They don't treat people like clients. They treat them like friends. And they always go the extra mile. They give them the extra thing. They find out about their families. They follow up with them. It's just so wonderful. It's not just put the things on the shelf here, we'll give you a bag. It's what do you need? How many children do you have? How old are they? What are their names? And then you go around and help them shop for the things that they need. And it's so much more respectful. And when you give, if you don't have that respect, there's no sense in giving. And allow people to give back in return if they can, as much as they can. So treat people, like friends, not clients. Serving, first one. The second one is accompanying. That's another step up a little bit. Walking side by side with somebody. If you can truly be with one hurting person, that's enough. If you can truly listen to one person, you've accomplished so much. If you can walk with one person through a time of sorrow, or questioning, or darkness, or fear, or sickness, that's enough. So serving, accompanying. The third thing is defending. When we think of advocacy, sometimes we think, oh, I can't do that. That's what John Lipa is very good at, advocacy. Because he's not afraid to go to the city council. I'm afraid to go to the city council. John is not. So we all have different gifts. So defending, advocacy for somebody who can't speak for himself, speaking the truth to power, all those kind of cliches, giving a voice to the voiceless. On a big scale, this takes skill, it takes experience, it takes even daring. But we can do it very quietly and simply too. If there's an injustice, name it, call it out for what it is. If somebody can't speak for himself, speak for him. It's pretty simple. Serving, accompanying, defending. And the fourth thing is being in solidarity. It's a little bit more of a nuance there. And some people are afraid of the word solidarity. It sounds like communism to them or something, I guess. I don't know. But according to Francis, it means seeking roads together, seeking what he calls paths to liberation. This can be on a national or a worldwide scale, and a lot of people are able to do that. And it could also be with one person. You can be in solidarity with one person. It means thinking of the effect that our choices have on other people. Francis says solidarity is seeing people not as rivals or statistics, but as brothers and sisters. And you stick up for your brothers and sisters. So that's what solidarity is. Anybody have anything to say about that? Jim? You've got to say it loud.
In today's bulletin, it says there's a Catholic Men's Conference. We have here, once a month, Fathers for Good. Been going on for 5 years. What's it about? How do you become a good father? Are you patient? Are you kind? Etc. And that's where Father Edison started this conference that's going to be held in May. Because what's happening in Philadelphia in a couple of months? Family. We have to have good mothers, good fathers, there's all kinds of little things. So if you can encourage people to go to things, and it just appeared for the first time in the bulletin today, but hopefully men need help.
I think many women would agree with that.
I mean, the women's have a conference, ours are, we're not in competition, we just need to be able to solidify each other.
Thanks, Jim. Did everybody hear that? Could you hear him back there? Good. Any other comments about the 4 ways in which we reach out to the edges? Now, the last thing is, how do we do it? And this might be the most important of all, not what we do, but how we do it. None of this stuff is new. It's all Catholic social teaching. It began in the 19th century with Leo XIII, and has been reiterated and added to by every pontiff since. So none of the stuff he's saying is new. It's the way he says it that's new. It's all Catholic social teaching. And in a nutshell, this is Catholic social teaching. Everybody has dignity. We work for community and the common good. We all have human rights. We must care for the vulnerable. Work has its own dignity and workers have rights. We're all interdependent. We care for creation and work for peace. It's not new, it's old. We just keep saying it over and over again in different ways. But what makes Francis unique is the way he does it, the way he talks, and the examples that he uses, and the stuff that he says to people, that he dares to say to people. It's his articulation of these things that have been around forever, and it makes them seem almost if it's new, but the manner in which they're presented. How we approach people is as important as what we do for them or do with them. In the long run, as you know, this is a cliche too, people won't remember what we said, what we did, but how we were with them. Were we loving? Were we kind? Were we accepting? That's what people will remember when they talk about us at our vigil or at our wake. Think of what you want them to talk about at your wake. If we treated them with respect and with love. Yes?
I just have something to say. The other day I was at a school, it was Martin Luther King Day, and they had a Martin Luther King, kind of the kids were involved in it. And one of the sayings that was on the wall that I can't forget it now, that Martin Luther King said, "We all came here on different ships, but now we're all in the same boat."
Oh. That's great. That's great. So the manner in which we do things is as important as what we do. Francis says, when he hears confessions, when a penitent says, he asks the penitent in confession, "Do you give alms?" "Yes, Father, I give alms." "Tell me, when you give alms, do you look the person in the eye?" "Oh, I never thought of that. I don't know whether I do or not." Then I say to him, "Do you touch the hand of the person or you just toss the coins to him?" This is the issue, touching the flesh of Christ. It's how you do it. If you throw the coins at him, you might as well not have given him anything because you haven't given him anything. It all goes back to that famous passage in Corinthians that's at every wedding. If we do all kinds of great and wonderful things and are eloquent and we suffer and build things and initiate all these projects, all of it's nothing if we don't have love. Popular culture said this forever. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. And the Beatles, all you need is love. That's it. It's Corinthians. It's pretty universal. So if we look at Pope Francis, we might consider his style of ministering and of leading and the way he seems to approach people. It's come to be known as the 3 H's. The first one is humanity. He's one with us. He's basically a sinner. That's what he says. That's what he is, a sinner. He chats rather than preaches. He calls a spade a spade. There's no pretense about him. He has an obvious love for the marginalized. He gives homey and down-to-earth similes and stories, the way Jesus did with his parables. He's not afraid to shock when he gives some blunt descriptions. When he calls the curia, it says the curia has existential Alzheimer's. He tells them not to go around with a funeral face, and he tells sisters that they should act like mothers, not spinsters. The Evangelical magazine, I was reading Sojourners the other day, the Evangelical says of him, I love this, Pope Francis is one of us, just a pilgrim trying to make his way home and taking public transportation wherever he can. It's great. So humanity is the first thing. The second one is humility, and there, you know all the examples of humility that have come, all these iconic pictures of him washing feet and cradling the lepers and doing selfies with teenagers. Simple vestments, where he lives, what kind of car he drives. It just, everything is humility. And it's not a put-on humility for effect, it's real. The third H is humor. And we all know how much humor can take something that's very deep and serious and help us swallow it. He exudes joy. He began his pontificate by saying to the other cardinals, I hope God will forgive you for what you've done. Humor is a great leveler. It puts people at ease. It lightens dark moods. It just makes things easier to swallow. It can be a powerful way to reach people through humor, to break through barriers and find the common good. I would add a fourth, hospitality. He's always talking about welcoming everybody. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome around the table. And as far as he's concerned, the fifth one would be holiness, I think. Now, the little prayer, I just threw that in as an extra. It's said that he says this prayer of St. Thomas More's every night. And it's a great little prayer. You can read it for yourselves. I love, grant me a good digestion and also something to digest. But it's a great way of living. And I would put, in 2 minutes, put the question to you, how do you think you could use the three H's, humanity, humility, and humor, in the way you approach people? Does manner really matter? There really isn't any more time for us to talk about this, but I just want to say that this year is called the Year of Consecrated Life that Father McKenna referred to. And in the letter that the Pope wrote to the religious of the world, he said three things. This might seem like a cliche too, but I find it's something I've been meditating on, these three things. That the aim of the Year of Consecrated Life, and it's also for all of us, is to look at the past with gratitude, live the present with passion, embrace the future with hope. Those three things. The past with gratitude, the present with passion, and the future with hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a delight to welcome you back, or if this is the first time you've joined us, we're very happy that you could come today. In thinking of our speaker, I was thinking that this is the year that the Pope has set aside for reflecting on and praying for those in consecrated life, those who have taken religious vows, men and women. And if you saw the paper yesterday morning, there was a beautiful story right on the front page of the Sisters of St. Joseph and their great work down in Selma, Alabama, and certainly significant with all that's been in the news about Selma, but It was really inspiring to read about the wonderful work that they were doing down there back in the 60s, and I believe they still continue to do work down in that area even to this day. We are really blessed by the ministry that is done by so many women religious, and I think it's just great that we have a wonderful representative of women religious and Sister Peg Brennan, who has been working with the Sisters of St. Joseph Northside, located over in the area near Holy Apostles, serving so many people. So we're delighted to welcome her, and especially, again, seeing that she's an Irish Colleen makes it even more beautiful. So welcome, Sister Peggy.
Also, that Sister Barbara Lum, who you see all over the place these days on the summit, she's a Sacred Heart girl too. Lived on Flower City Park. Oh, can't you? I'm sorry. Sister Barbara Lum, who you see all in the paper all the time with the Selma stories, grew up on Flower City Park. She's a Sacred Heart girl too. We got good starts, I think, at Sacred Heart. Today we're going to talk about fringes. Not the kind that you put on a scarf or a shawl, but the edges of our world, far and near, the edges of our experience, the edges of our comfort, what our Holy Father Francis calls the peripheries. When I visited our sisters in Brazil, there's a phenomenon that, as far as their cities are concerned, that really has always struck me. In Brazil, the richest people live in the center of the city. And the poorer people, the farther you get out to the edges, the poorer the people are. And the reason is that people couldn't make a living in the rural areas, so they came to the cities. They squatted outside of the cities in concentric rings of people, and those little squatters, tent cities became suburbs, really. So the farther you get from the center, the poorer the people in Brazil. And I presume it's the same in Argentina. So when Pope Francis talks about the peripheries, he's talking about that. It's the opposite in the United States. The very poorest people are concentrated in the center of the cities, and the richer, the farther out you get in these concentric circles, the richer the people are, the better off they are. So it's a little bit different for us. So our understanding of the periphery is a little bit different. So when he talks about the people going to the periphery to find the people, he means going out to the edges. Now, the edges, literally the edges of the geographic location, but the edges of experience as well. One of his most compelling concepts, ones that he's repeated again and again, is that the church needs to go to the periphery, needs to look at the world in a new way, needs to see from a new angle, needs to move away from the core to the outskirts and view the world from there. And in particular, it needs to view the world from the vantage point of the poor, the oppressed, the discounted, the uneducated, the terrorized, the ones on the edges of mainstream society. And the view from there is very, very different. In a talk that he gave to a group of religious women in 2013, he said, "I'm convinced of one thing. The great changes in history were realized when reality was seen not from the center, but from the periphery. Reality is understood only from the periphery and not when our viewpoint is equidistant from everything. If you look at anything from another angle, it can become a different object. Filmmakers and photographers have always known that. I always have the example in my head of Bishop Sheen. When we watched Bishop Sheen on those little television sets, he looked as if he was 7 feet tall. But when he came to Rochester, I couldn't believe how short he was. It couldn't be the same man. But then I began to think, well, why did he look so big on television? For one thing, there was nobody else in the screen with him to compare him to. And who knew how tall the blackboard was? And also, the filmmaker would always take a low-angle shot, so everybody looks bigger than life from a low angle. Filmmakers have known this forever, and poets have known it forever, and novelists have known it forever, that if you use point of view, somebody's point of view, you can get across a particular emotion or some narrative idea. If you look at the world flat on, your view can be one-dimensional. And if you view a person that way, flat on, no backstory, no history, no context, no relationship to other people, then you only get one small part of that person. And how many times do we make snap judgments about people on our first meeting from what they wear, how they talk, what age they are, their ethnicity, the color of their skin, what they do or don't do for a living? I experienced this one icy January day. I was coming out of Holy Apostles Rectory, and there are cement steps there. I had packages in both arms. I'm the original bag lady, and so I couldn't hang on, even if there were a railing, but there wasn't a railing. So it was you know how icy it got this winter? Oh, will it ever end? There was an inch of ice on the steps, and I just knew that I couldn't do it. I was going to fall if I went down those steps. So I looked around to see if anybody was around who could give me a hand. Just across the street, there was a young man of late teens, early 20s, looked kind of sullen, a little scary. He had just gotten out of a car, and I just saw some exchange of some money in little glassine bags. A sight that you see. And I thought, he's the only game in town, I gotta ask him. So I called across the street, and he looked up, and he looked mad. And I said, could you ever, my little old lady voice, could you ever help me? I can't get down the steps. He came over, still with this scowl on his face, he came over, took me by the hand, then he put both his arms around me, very gently put me down on the bottom step. And then he said, I'll walk you over to your car. And I said, oh no, I'm so embarrassed. Thank you, I'm fine. Thank you so much. And he said, no, thank you for asking me. And then he walked away. I learned a couple of things. What do you think I learned? Not to judge, number one. And what else?
Allow people a chance to reach out to you.
Exactly. He gave him a chance to do something for somebody else, and that I trusted him to do that. It was very humbling. But I learned a lot from that. And if we look at people, you can't tell by what they look like. You can't tell by all the fears that you have. When he said, thank you for asking me, it brought tears to my eyes. But anyway, so where is this periphery? We use different lenses to find it. First of all, the periphery of the world or our neighborhood, of our families. Even our families have peripheries, and we think about that. And certainly our church. First of all, it's where the poor are. This is Francis talking. Where we encounter and touch the flesh of the living Christ. That's the way he puts it. Touch the flesh of the living Christ, literally. He says, a poor church for the poor begins by reaching out to the flesh of Christ, getting your hands dirty, smelling like the sheep, letting go of prejudice and the fear of the other. He says, we can't be starched Christians. Listen to this. What he means by that is those overeducated Christians who speak of theological matters while they calmly sip their tea. So in Rochester, we don't have to go very far to encounter the poor. We're well known nationwide for some bad things, like being the highest in child poverty. It's really kind of disheartening to think of that. And childhood poverty, extreme poverty, we're way high on that list. Poverty among female-headed households, we're very high on that list. And in our city, we have de facto segregation in our schools and in our housing. We don't have, it's against the law to have segregation, but in de facto, that's what it is. So it's where the poor are, is where we encounter the living Christ. We also encounter the periphery is also with people with different experiences from ours, people with different viewpoints from ours, even different beliefs from ours. Another road that I think we're going to be watching in this papacy is interreligious communion. He's welcomed and befriended leaders of all faiths. There's a wonderful picture that I'm sure you've seen of himself and his childhood friend, Argentinian Rabbi Abraham Skorka, and Muslim imam at the Western Wall, praying at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. And it's another iconic picture of him. He's really good at that, of bites, not only sound bites, but pictures in which one picture tells so much about what he's trying to do, and that's one of them. We need to create a culture of friendship and look for the common ground and be open. We can also marginalize people. Personally, we can marginalize people. I know I marginalize people who I think are right, capital R-I-G-H-T, right-wing, anything. I marginalize them. They could be political, church, whatever. If they're right-wing, I marginalize them, and I know that I do that. And I learned another lesson last Friday. I was at the doctor's, and this doctor has my number, and he just tries to press my buttons and knows which ones to do. And I've never been able to figure out his politics, so I'm very careful what I say to him. And so he said to me, well, you know what, this thing about immigration, you know what I think? And I thought, oh, here it comes. I think that anybody should be welcomed into the country who want to come here to work or to maybe even get a path to citizenship, if they learn and speak the native language. I thought, oh, eye roll on me. Did you hear what I said? I said, yes, I heard. You know what the native language is? I said, yes, English. He said, no, Apache. Isn't that great? So if we all learn Apache, then we can stay. The periphery also is where we encounter the invisible people in our society. A few years ago, our congregation did a ministry needs assessment. We went around in all the places, rural, not all, but many places, both rural and urban, in the diocese, the area of the diocese, and we talked to all kinds of people, judges, law enforcement people, educators, ministers, ordinary people, and asked them what the needs were that weren't being addressed in their area. And the word that came up over and over again in all of our conversations was isolation. Isolation, that people, that's the core, the root of all the other ills, is that we don't talk to each other, we don't know each other, we're afraid of each other. Even though we have all kinds of social media, it's not bringing us together in community as it should. We yearn for connection, we're in need of community. If we had that community, then our responses to the other needs would follow. So we began talking about invisible people, people that we take for granted, that we see every day, but we just take for granted and never think of them as individuals. People in low-paying service jobs that we meet every day and probably don't even look them in the eye. Store clerks, migrant workers, crossing guards, the kid who mows the lawn. The poor elderly who've outlived all their family and they're too proud to ask for help. The panhandler, the guy when you come off the inner loop who has the sign that says, we'll work for food. Or in the silent, I've seen this a lot in this neighborhood, this silent immigrant women who we pass every day. They're not speaking. It seems as though they, for whatever reason, they're invisible. Every day, I see people who seem to be on the edge of societies. Young single moms who struggle every day, want to be good mothers and don't have any role models to do that, who wait wait in lines, all kinds of lines, lines at the emergency room, the welfare lines, food cupboards. They're always on the receiving end, and unlike like that young man, nobody's asked them to do anything for them. They're always on the receiving. They've suspended their education, and they don't have any long-range plan to resume it. Men and women who are addicted to drugs and alcohol, who are mentally ill, who turn to stealing and panhandling and prostitution to feed their habits and seem to be just out there with no real support, no real friends who will stand by them when they're ready to make a new choice, and that's when you need a friend. Their families have grown weary of them and cut them off, and they really can't trust anybody else. You can't hear me. I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me. Homeless men and women who go from house to abandoned house every night, sleeping wherever they can and moving on. Now can you hear me? No? Thank you. Oh. I'm sorry. Oh, it's a whole new thing, isn't it? We'll go back to the beginning. People who are trying unsuccessfully to find employment, and people who are newly released from jail or prison and who find that they're unemployable because employers are afraid of them or biased against them. So the cards are really stacked against them. But what I've discovered is that what people need, beyond food and clothing and shelter and the occasional help with RG&E, is community, is friendship, is good humor, is having somebody ask their opinion or respect their experience, is someone's believing that they too have an inner life, that they too seek the good. It's pretty simple, really. You know that the Pope just made a bunch of new cardinals, and he went to the periphery to get those cardinals. There are none from the United States. There are only 5 from Europe. All the rest are from places like, I had to write them down because I don't know these places, Tonga, Cabo Verde, wherever that is, Vietnam, Panama. They're from the periphery. And so he's giving us a good example of that. But he reminded those cardinals when he first spoke to them that Mary, our dear Mary, mother, was on the periphery, that she was rejected, or well, at least marginalized by her society because of her questionable pregnancy. She was marginalized. So she's a good example to us. He also said in the same homily that what he calls the gospel of the marginalized is where our credibility is. We're called to bring good news to the poor. It's as simple as that. I have one little story from my work that there's this one woman who is on the street, drug addicted and into prostitution, and everybody knows her. She's been around for a long time. And she went to church with me over at Holy Apostles for the Holy Day, the December 8th. And she's Catholic background. And she decided that she was going to go to Sunday on her own a couple of weeks later. So she went to church, and she told me about this on Monday morning. She said, I went in, and I stayed for the whole thing, and which was kind of hard for her because she's kind of jumpy. And she stayed for the whole thing and stayed for the coffee hour. And she was talking to somebody, and everybody knew who she was. It made her a very courageous thing for her to even go. She heard a man say, well, I guess they let anybody in church these days. And she said to me, I'm confused. She said, I thought we were the kind of people Jesus hung around with. She's right, absolutely right, but you won't see her in church for a while. It could happen, we can all do it. We can all make those judgments about people. But the story, to me, is right out of St. Luke's Gospel. The Pharisees, and that woman who's anointing Jesus' feet, doesn't he know what kind of woman this is? It's right out of the Gospel. It was really amazing to hear her tell the story. On your little sheet there, the church is not the church only for good people, Do we want to describe who belongs to the church, to this feast, to the sinners? All of us sinners are invited. You can't pick and choose. The church is for everyone, beginning with the most marginalized. It's everyone's church. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, because I want this to be a little give and take, first of all, if you don't know everybody at your table, would you please introduce yourselves so that you know who you're talking to? If you would look at the questions, and I just want you to talk with each other, think about it for a minute or two, and then talk if you feel like it, if you want to, talk with each other about this or anything else that we said, or that from Father Donnelly's homily. Who are these people on the periphery? Who are the invisible people that I meet every day that I just never thought of before? Why are they excluded and forgotten and discounted? And I'm sure that you have a story, everybody has some kind of a story about an encounter with somebody who's on the periphery that made an impression on you. Just as much discussion as you want to have, and then we'll come back in a few minutes. Say 10 minutes.